Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Economist Unplugged, this time with Jane Kolodinsky, Professor Emerita from the University of Vermont. Jane, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. Really appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
Um, let's get started. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, including a fun fact?
Oh, fun facts. I'm not a very fun person. I always open with that. But my fun fact is I am a very avid outdoors person and exercise. And I don't think I missed closing my exercise ring for the past 7 years, every day. So
Wow,
I
that's
don't know if that's
awesome.
fun, but that's what I do in my downtime.
That's great. So when you say exercise, have you done anything like outside, like run? Like, do you have like a preferred form of exercise, or it's just a focus on fitness overall?
It's a focus on fitness, but I try to run or walk every day, about seven.
Great. Awesome. Awesome. Then, why don't you tell us a little bit about all the stuff that you're doing? Because I know you are retired, but that doesn't mean that you are any less busy.
Right. I put retired in air quotes. And so I am emerita from the University of Vermont, where I spent my entire career, 35, 36 years, to be exact, where I rose through the ranks, assistant, associate, full professor, department chair for a very long time. But there's a reason. Our department chairs were not really just paper pushers or clerks. We got to actually do a lot of strategic planning and a lot of building, and I was able to mentor and create new curriculum and really invent to reinvent, as we called it. We weren't a traditional ag econ department. We were merged, agricultural economics, consumer economics, design, a whole bunch of things. And it turned out that we turned into a transdisciplinary community development and applied economics department that had a lot to do with what happened in 2010, which was food systems. So, things worked out. I was also an administrator, another kind of administrator. I was associate dean for research and director of the experiment station, where I also got to make a lot of, I think, forward-looking changes and decided, universities change, Samantha. You get new leadership and they have different ideas. And after being at UVM for 37 years, I said, well, what's my next step? What am I going to do? And I took a job as a dean in a small regional public. That was probably the worst decision that I ever made in my life. They hired me, and what they said they wanted wasn't what they wanted at all. And so I came in and stayed for a year. And so now my grants are at Colorado State. I still have an economic research service agreement and a subaward through the University of Kentucky. And I'm director of research for a kind of a small consulting firm out of Walla Walla, Washington. So that's what I'm doing. I think I published 6 papers last year, and so I'm busy. It's just different.
Wow, that may I just say that's awesome. Wow, wow. Retirement hasn't kind of been, I don't know, is there like a traditional retirement? I don't know, but it doesn't seem like that's what it's been. It's just made you productive in a different way.
Yeah, it did. I don't have any administrative tasks right now except to manage my own work. I still have a few PhD students at the University of Vermont, too, to be exact. And I kind of am the controller of my own time now. It's that's what's really different is time is different. I used to be a 24/7 person. My job was everything, right? I have a family, I have a spouse, I have pets, and I have a life, but work was always there. And when you are on a subaward or you're working for a consulting firm, it's by the hour. And so it's really hard to switch that 24/7 mindset to,
Mhm.
oh, I'm on the clock. I'm not on the clock. So I feel like I volunteer a lot now.
Awesome, awesome. My next question to you is, you have done so much work in the food space and other areas. So with your experience and publication record, you're still publishing. What do you think are some of the more exciting things that you look forward to doing or seeing others do in the domain of food economics?
Yeah, I am interested in a lot of things, which is what has kept me, I think, kind of spry and vigorous during my whole career because I could get interested in a lot of things. I'm not interested in finance. I can pretty much say that, but
Ah,
things that have to
me
do
too.
with food systems and the well-being of the consuming public, and that could be anywhere from looking at food demand, obesity, regenerative agriculture, food systems broadly speaking. So there are a lot of things I think on the horizon, and I'll take a step back in a moment, that are kind of exciting. The new food pyramid is one, and I know there's a lot of our colleagues who are looking at the new food pyramid. The new protein craze is another one.
Oh,
In
yeah,
fact, the Seafair webinar on
that's
tomorrow,
right.
actually, that's Friday, is going to be on the protein trend. Um, I had looked at obesity. We still struggle with overeating. And now, when you look at the way that people are told to eat, it's with count your macros. And my first degree was in nutrition. And I'm like, what the heck is a macro? And so a macro is just carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. So they just changed the name.
Oh,
Yeah, it's just like in computing and statistics. We used to call it syntax and now it's coding, and that's what's, new. And it's like, what's coding? Oh, coding is just writing syntax. So the vocabulary changes, but the issues do not. So going back to what I find exciting, I've spent my life really looking at consumer information. And that means labeling, that means other ways that consumers receive information, and you can apply that to whatever the flavor of the day is, whether that's protein, whether it's genetic engineering. So, applying our concepts and our techniques to look at what we would call the economics of information
mhm.
can be applied to a lot of things. So that's not going away. Labeling in terms of what is healthy, what is natural, that hasn't been solved yet. And now, when we think about the changing vernacular out there, climate change is out, but regenerative agriculture is in. And you think, what's different? So, regenerative agriculture, for example, is really, you can use the word conservation agriculture, which goes back to the 1930s. And just, the vocabulary changes a little bit, and you just change you weave in and out and have to learn what the landscape is. And I think that's what my long-term experience has allowed me to do, is to read the landscape and to use the tools in our toolbox and our methodologies um, to address contemporary issues.
Well said. And I, what I'm kind of taking from what you said is also be flexible in terms of where you can apply your tool and your methodology to, the
Yeah,
kind of
absolutely.
problems that you can look at, because things go in and out of fashion. Took me a while to actually realize that ride the wave when you can and then move on to another wave. At least that's what I tell myself.
And is that what you're doing too in your own career?
Trying, trying. I did a lot of experiments. Then currently I'm doing a lot of surveys. And then I hope to be able to get back to a little bit of experiments. But I'm trying to learn new tools. Like I learned about social network analysis and finding ways to characterize the structure and the composition of networks. So that's pretty interesting. So I'm kind of trying to see where I can apply that tool.
You know,
So yeah.
Social network analysis is really interesting. The thing about it in our field is that when you want to publish it, you have to know what those nodes are, and you have to know who are in those nodes. So then, how do you hide who the players are so as not to give someone more accolades or something? It turns out we were doing a social network analysis, or I was working with faculty who were, and it turned out that the extension service was like at the center of the universe. And but yet that would really upset your community partners to know that, wait a minute, what do you mean extension services? And so the vocabulary around social network analysis is a tricky one. So more power
Oh,
to you.
oh, thank you for saying that. Oh, yeah. And there are issues related to endogeneity. And because I am connected to you for a reason, but then you are connected to me for another reason or the very same reason. And so how do we disentangle that? So it's a challenge, but maybe that's an opportunity as well.
Right.
So at least that's how I'm kind of trying to frame it in my mind.
So,
Yeah.
you also mentioned experimental analysis. This is something that I followed through my career because when I was getting my PhD at Cornell, experiments were out. We didn't do experimental work. That was for the psychologists and maybe the business people, because there was no external validity. And now, when you look over time, experiments are in. It's like the wave just changes. And so, I think having a flexible, not only flexible view of what you can use your tools to study, but a flexible toolbox in
Mhm.
terms of knowing your econometrics, knowing your experimental design, knowing your survey research, knowing how to utilize some qualitative techniques and how to analyze qualitative data. And you know what? That takes time. And so I've had the opportunity to explore all of those things over what I'm going to say is a pretty long career.
And an illustrious one because you've done and you're doing so many different things. That very nicely dovetails into my next question, which is that you said that you work a lot, you have worked a lot in administration. So my question is, what drew you to these roles? Was it, is that something about your personality or the kind of tasks that administration requires, or is it a bit of both?
I hmm. I think it's a bit of both. I do not, my joke when I was Associate Dean of Research is I did a lot of mouse clicking. It's like, approve this, disapprove this. So that the clerk part of it is not my thing at all. That just goes along with the job, the repetitive things that you have to do. But the ability to make a change. So I think I mentioned this, that when I became chair of a department that didn't know what it was going to be, the administrators decided they were just going to merge these things, right? And somehow it was going to save money. It never saves money. I'll just tell you that. It decreases productivity for 5 years while people are finding their way. But that's what I'll say higher administrators like to do. They said the newest thing is I'll go in and rearrange the university and then I'll leave and do better for myself. And then it gets left to figure itself out. And I think there are some good things, some bad things. But when I became chair, we were a unit that didn't know what it was going to be because someone decreed what we were going to be. And so it just turned out that I just kind of took the helm and took the leadership opportunity. They hired a chair from the outside. It didn't go well. And it was almost, this is funny, it was almost over the dean's dead body that he hired me as chair because I can be assertive. They call it women aggressive, Samantha. I'll just tell you this. They call women aggressive and men assertive, and it's a really hard it's hard. But about 10 years later, that person came up to me at a dinner and said, I have to apologize. You did a really good job. And I was like, oh, thank you. We weren't sure. So I think part of it is personality. I like to take the lead on things. But I also like to mentor people, and I don't like to tell people what to do. That was never my leadership style. It was, what can you be successful? How does it fit into the whole mix of things? I also used to tell faculty who would complain about other faculty, if you have time to complain about other people, then you have lots of time on your hands. You have too much time. So let's find some other things for you to
To
do
do.
because different people are good at different things, right? Some you've got the researchers, some you've got the really good teachers, some you have people who really enjoy service. And together that builds a powerhouse. It builds a really strong unit. Everybody can't do everything. So it's part personality. It's part, I think I have the skills, project management skills. And it's, it's part, you got to be in the right place at the right time, I think.
That's well said, because you're right. That matters, being in the right place at the right time, because you can have all the traits in the world, all the heart, but something which is outside of your control does not work out.
Right. So I wasn't going to leave Vermont. I have a spouse that we managed to have a dual career in one place. I have three children who we raised three children in the same place. I wasn't about to move. And you know, when you go on the job market, the first question you're asked, and this is a funny one too, you're either asked, why have you moved around so much? Or why have you stayed at the same place for so long? It's like, well, that's an interesting question, right? And there are different answers. There were different answers for that. So when I finally moved away from Vermont, and again, I said it was because of changes in leadership and leadership style. And I guess I spent a good 2 years defending a really strong transdisciplinary department that was going to be broken up. And I'm like, why? Why would you break up a really strong place? So I ended up leaving. My kids are grown. My spouse he can take care of himself. And again, that wasn't the right choice either. So I think my advice to people would be, I went in with my eyes wide shut, I think. I believed what people said, you know, all the best intentions. And it really wasn't what they wanted. And so I went into the dean's job. It was a business school, and did everything that they asked me to do, and then got out quick. And that was really hard because I give everything my all, and I like to stay. I stay 37 years in one place. So, you know, and now in the last 3 years, I've had three jobs.
Expect the unexpected.
There you go.
Should we go with that?
Expect the unexpected. That's right. And I would say go in with eyes wide open and really do your homework and do some background work if you're going to take a job, because part of it is the fit. And for University of Vermont and me at the time, and for so many years, the fit was perfect. This was, you know, it was a land grant. It was applied. It was innovative. It wasn't all about athletics. It was, you know, nobody was really depicting what you had to do, and we could be innovative. And that was it was a great place to spend my career.
Fabulous. So along those lines, and you've talked a little bit about it already, but for people who are interested in pursuing administrative roles or considering administrative roles, you are indicating that they should go in with their eyes wide open. That's what I remember. Anything else? Like, are there any specific traits to doing?
Well, I guess you have to know the culture of the institution. And this is another one. It's an analogy. There are a few kinds of institutions. I want to say that the institution that I spent my career with, University of Vermont, was rough green paper. Like that's where the advertising was. That's how the place is sold. And then there are places that are shiny gold and red and so on really slick paper. That gives you a real indication of what kind of an institution that you're going into. Is it also to understand and talk to people about, is it a top-down institution? Is it an inclusive institution? Et cetera. Those things are really, really important, or you're not going to be successful regardless of your skills and abilities. The fit, we tell our kids that, how do you choose a college? We're college professors, right? How do you choose a college? The fit has to be as good as where you might want to be. And so you have to do your homework in order to do that.
And what you're saying is a little different from the homework that we do when we are going for like a faculty position or any other position, because over there, okay, need to know who are the people in the department that are working on different issues, but the culture aspect of it, probably you may not need to spend that much time focusing on that. But when it comes to administrative roles, maybe that is something which probably you have to spend a lot of time thinking about whether that matches with your value and vision.
Absolutely. And this is really because as a faculty member, especially as a junior faculty member, you want to go in, you want to fit in your department, you want to feel part of it, you want to be successful, and you could really care less who the president is. I mean, really. I was walking to my spinning class the day before yesterday, and this car stops and says, "Professor Kolodinsky," and I couldn't really see who it was. I'm like, "Who is that in the car?" He goes, "Oh, I'm this person," and it was like 5 years since I've seen that person. And I go, "Well, we thought you left." And I said, "Well, I did, and I'm back." And he goes, "I don't even know who the president was." I was like, "I don't even know who the president was." Dean? What's a dean? But you really have to, if you're in administration, first of all, if you're a chair, you have to know how the other chairs operate, and you have to know how your dean operates.
Mhm.
Um, so if you want to stay at the institution that you're at, that you got your first faculty job, it's it's really important whether or not you fit in that culture and whether or not you could move ahead. There's another story that I could tell. My PhD was from Cornell, and I always thought, oh, Cornell would be, that would be a great place to go back to, and they don't hire their own.
Yeah.
So you also have to know that. Are you willing to move? And I never thought about this. If I could go back, I never had a 5, 10 year plan ever. Like I'm going to go into administration and then I'm going to move into this and then I'm going to move into that. I didn't operate that way. So I guess my advice for people would be that's something you probably should listen to. I mean, I didn't know. I didn't have this trajectory. A lot of times university presidents, they have a trajectory. They know that's where they want to be, in 15 years. I didn't.
That's a great point. Along those lines, what I also wanted to ask, and this is a question that is of personal interest to me, because I was reflecting on this. A lot of my career and what I've done has been through things that I've actually learned on the job and I've done by learning by doing so much of it. And I don't feel embarrassed for saying this. I've never taken a class on experimental and behavioral economics. I learned everything that I've done on the job. And I think I'm pretty good at experimental design. So, my question to you is, are there some things that you have learned on the job that you can share with people? And I know there are many, but
I
whatever.
learn something new every day. And
That's
I'm
a
going to
great,
say
that's a
I came
great
late to the game with the people
attitude.
skills. I learn something new every day. I, I yeah. Um, so yeah, I don't know. Are you asking me as a faculty member or an administrator?
Yeah, both.
Okay. As a faculty member, I'm like you. I learned. Here's a new technique. Fine, let's read up on it. The manual is really important. Now we don't need the manuals. We can just go online, right? But we can learn. When you go through undergraduate, graduate, and PhD, really the undergraduate is there to teach you how to learn, right? And how to operate, right? The graduate degree gives you more skills. The PhD, you're always learning on your own. So yeah, the skill part I think is easy to obtain. It's the it's the emotional intelligence part that's a little more difficult. It's the politics part that I think is something that is really, really important and wasn't something that I was born with. I
Could you elaborate on that? Like when you are talking about emotional intelligence, are you talking about navigating politics
Yeah,
around you?
it's navigating politics. It's knowing what motivates, for example, your faculty or your fellow administrators, or what their aim really is. So I was never a chaser of cited citations to put your publications in, because for me the citations, you get cited by the people who always did what they always did, and they're the leaders of their field, and they're not really looking for innovation, right? If you're innovative, you didn't do the right thing somehow. This is the world according to Jane. And so to understand what motivates people and how to play the game is something that I would advise anyone who wants to go into administration to really do. I am not. I am an introvert that was an extrovert in the classroom. And I can be an extrovert in this meeting we're having. I can be an extrovert on media presentations. I could be extrovert at meetings and presentations, but I'm really an introvert at heart. So work on your weaknesses and learn how to navigate the world, because the university is much more political than I ever imagined. So I got an MBA after my nutrition degree, and I thought I was going to go to business. And I thought, geez, the last place I want to be is in business. It's so political. Oh, well, as we both know, the university is a very political animal.
Yep, yep. It's a different kind of politics, but it's still there.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. As you've talked about it, you recently retired and then now you are also working in the private sector. So, can you share some key experiences that you've had in the private space that is different from what happens in academia?
Yeah, well, my private sector, it's a .com, so yes, it's a private sector. I have a supervisor, but it's a consulting firm that has many projects that are subawards through universities. So it's the things that I've always done it's conducting the surveys, it's writing the articles. So in that way, it's not that different. Um, but what's different about it, and for me, what feels different is that I like certainty, and not
Mm.
certainty in terms of this is what I'm going to be doing, but certainty in terms of I'm getting a paycheck. And so as I opened, I work 24/7. And so when you're an exempt employee, you're paid and you work all the time, right? As a faculty member, you go to sleep thinking about it. You wake up in the middle of the night making notes. And being in the private sector, you're on the clock. And so in my job anyway, I'm hourly. And so I'm not supposed to be working when I'm off the clock. And I'm dependent on projects that the company gets.
So,
That's really
how do you
scary.
turn your mind off?
So,
It's I find it is right. You did say, right, you wake up in the middle of the night and you think about something. So, even in the private sector, having been in a role that always requires your mind to be turned on and thinking, how do you navigate that part where, when you're not on the clock, what do you do?
I've never learned that part.
Oh.
Which is why academia was a great place for me, right? And so I also like to be doing a lot of different things. And so another thing about the private sector is this is my project. I'm supposed to be working on this project. And as a faculty member, oh, I feel like working on my syllabus now, or I feel like, working on that paper, or I can meet students, or I could do this or that. And that's also very different. So if you're a juggler like I am, I could never work in a factory because I can't do the same thing for 8 hours in a row. Academia was great. So for me, that ability to focus only on one thing is at a time is very, very different.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Great, great. So looking back to, your past work and interactions, other than the Colorado thing, which you've said, is there something that you would redo looking back?
If things were the same, I would be a faculty member again, hands down. Teaching research service. That was the right career for me. And I didn't know that starting out. I was a nutrition major. I was going to work in a hospital, and then I was like, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. I'll work in business. And so I got an MBA. Oh, I don't know if that's right. So I'll get a PhD. And then each step, I guess my point is you don't have to have your whole career mapped, but some people do. And maybe it's best to do that. I didn't do that, but as someone who always liked learning, I guess I never left really the academy, and it was the best thing I ever could do. I love my job. I still do.
I think that's one of the things that many of us academics can actually say that, we do like our job is not our job. It's on really good days, it can be like fun all the time,
Yeah.
even through the frustrations and everything. Absolutely. What is something that you wish someone had told you when you were starting out? Some wisdom that you would, pass on to a early career, a graduate student, an early career faculty, or a scholar?
Um, I guess know the landscape, but don't be afraid to be innovative. And it's hard. So in my experience, I had just wonderful professors at Cornell. But two of them said, Jane, you're never going to be accepted by anybody. You like marketing, you like economics, you like, to consumer welfare and all these things. Nobody's going to accept you. I'm like, huh, well, I did it anyway. So, but, and then, it's so interesting. Someone who I thought was going to be my major professor was an experimental marketer and made me cry and said, "You're stupid. You can't do this." And I basically found someone who did. So I guess I think being encouraging and honest is really honest, but encouraging is really important because who knew that transdisciplinary food systems would be where would really start in 2009? Who knew that, right? You were a nutritionist, you were a food economist, you were an
Mhm.
ag economist, and here we have these things that turned into what I'm going to say is like my perfect fit, which is transdisciplinary. So what looked to me and to other people like I was zigzagging through life really all came together. And it's all about, to me, these intractable problems that we have that need to be solved, that the economist isn't going to solve it, the physicist isn't going to solve it, the engineer isn't going to solve it, and we haven't cracked that nut yet. You can get all
Mhm.
these people in a room and they still speak different languages and they still use different methodologies, and economists are still kind of low people on the totem pole. It's all about STEMs. And I'm like, no, it's about STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, math, and social science. It's all of those things. And only together can we solve these problems. So
Absolutely. My final question to you is, and some of it has already come out through this discussion, is your career has been very impactful. But how do you define professional impact? And can you share with us maybe one or two things that you have done, which in your opinion has been the most impactful thing that you've done?
I, there's so many things. First is helping young minds to move on to the next generation. That was really important. So the teaching part, really important. And having a strong liberal arts background and putting the tools in students' toolboxes to solve the problems. That's tremendous. So that's something I think that I've contributed towards in as an educator. As a researcher, there are a couple of anecdotes that I can think of that really stand out in my mind. One is early on, I did a project for an attorney on rent-a-centers. And rent-a-centers, rent-to-own, were ripping people off. I mean, you pay 500% interest and you never own the thing, right? You can never get out from under that hole. And the lawyers came from New York City, and we're going way back. I just watched the documentary on the BlackBerry. I don't even know if you know what a BlackBerry is, but it was
I
the
do.
original. I just watched that documentary. But these people came up from New York City or where they came from, and they were lamenting because Vermont didn't have any internet and they couldn't use their BlackBerries and all these things. And I was asked I was asked during this what is it, a deposition, a full day deposition. What other company do you know that will take anything back in any condition and give your money back? And at the time, I was like, oh, I know, and I don't believe they do that now, but it was LL Bean. And, and so, right, you could take anything back to LL Bean. And they were flabbergasted, and the attorneys won the case. And And all of these plaintiffs that had been, I'm going to say, ripped off by rent-a-centers, got money back, and it was around the holidays. So that's number one. That was really, really
Wow.
important for me. And it wasn't anything. I got a couple publications out of it by identifying and doing research on interest rates charged by rent to own, but it was meaningful, Samantha. And so the applied part, and I have another story too, but we don't have a lot of time to discuss it. But it's the ones that impact the consumer and the public that really matter to me. And it's by using the expertise that I had and the connections that I had that I was able to do that.
Um, First of all, that was a fun story. Second of all, I think it is very telling to me. I'll tell you. So, from my first reaction from listening to your story is that you have built your research career so much working on food. But, and of course, there are lots of impactful things that you've done, but the thing that you share about is something which is not the main focus, has not been the main focus of your research program, but it still was impactful. So in that sense, I feel that we have to be very, very open minded in terms of thinking about what impact is and what it can mean. Like, always be open to that, and maybe reflect on what the impact of your work is. That
Oh,
is
I
what
should
I.
have used a food example, Samantha, but I didn't. That's the
But
one
you
that came to
should, come on, please do share.
mind.
But oh, and the other thing that I wanted to say is that, and I will get back to your food example. But you said that, oh, I got a couple of publications out of it, and that's the other thing. When we start out as early career researcher, mid, senior, whatever, we think about the lines in our CV. But like in the full career, it's the story that your career is saying rather than one or two or three publications. At least that's how I think about it. I know
Hmm.
many people still put a lot of premium on the number of publications they have towards when they are retiring, but I feel that, and that's one way, but also the other way is to kind of think about the whole impact that your efforts have had on, like, people and consumers around you. So that's what I took from what you shared. But yes, back to your food example.
Well, my food example, and this is something I've been, what advice would I give people? If you get into controversial food system policy issues, it's going to be hard. I'm just going to say that. So I'm going back to my economics of information, right?
Mhm.
Biotechnology labeling. I got into it early. I got into it in, oh gosh, so many years ago with RBST and Posilac and injecting cows to make more milk. And it wasn't the milk was genetically engineered, but it was the pharmaceutical that was being injected into the cows to make more milk. And the woman who was the scientist that found out that Posilac wasn't really a great product, it gave cows mastitis and cows were going lame and so on, was kind of kicked out. And we were all brought into a room by a dean, and the dean says, "Don't touch this subject. I don't want you to talk to anybody. Don't do research on it." And well, that's what I chose to spend a lot of my career on. I'm like, "What do you mean? Don't do that." So I've spent my career on economics of information, and that do consumers need to know whether or not their food is genetically engineered, right? We're based on consumers vote with their dollars. Consumers have enough information. What's Econ 101, right? We have information in order to make the decisions that maximize our preferences. And here we're being told, no, don't do that. I went to a biotechnology conference, and the keynote speaker said, consumers are too stupid to know any of this, therefore we don't want to involve consumers. And here Jane is in the audience, the consumer economist. Like, are you kidding? So again, another impetus for me to continue this. But my story is that in Vermont was the first state that had mandatory genetic engineering, and I did the background work for the Attorney General that got this passed, that the consumer's right to know was more important than a company's right not to reveal how they produce their food. That was the ruling. And here we are, so many years later, we're still in this quagmire of do we label, don't we label? And the story really here is that it is one of the Policy is normative, right? It's what people think should be, not necessarily what is. Like 2 + 2 is 4. Well, today's world, who knows what 2 + 2 is, um, but policy is what should be. Women should be given paid maternity leave or whatever. Families should be given paid family leave. That's a should, right? Not a this must happen. And so labeling is a policy issue, and therefore what I've experienced in my career, it doesn't really matter how good the research is and how empirically sound you were in the scientific method and the data you've collected, your reviewers view with their own bias in a controversial issue, right? Like genetically engineered foods. Um, so the bottom line here for impact is I really feel like using a scientific approach and empirical data actually helped get the law passed in Vermont. So
That's
that was
fabulous.
impactful.
Absolutely, absolutely. Great. Well, that brings us to the end of today's conversation. Jane, thank you so much for joining us and sharing I know a little bit of your professional life and, your personality with us. This has been such a fun conversation.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I've had fun doing it.
Great. Awesome.